Peter, a single dad, slips a recording device into his daughter Keisha's hair before school, desperate to understand the reason for her recent silence. But just 15 minutes later, his heart races as he hears something so alarming that he immediately dials 911. What he uncovers next is more shocking than he ever imagined. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Peter stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the colorful playground outside. The laughter of children filled the air, but his heart felt heavy. He turned to look at his daughter, Keisha, who sat quietly on the living room floor, her tiny hands clutching a stuffed elephant. "Hey, sweetheart," Peter said softly, kneeling beside her. "Are you excited for school tomorrow?" Keisha shrugged, her big brown eyes avoiding her father's gaze. "I guess so," she mumbled. Peter's brow furrowed with worry. This wasn't like his little girl at all. Just a few weeks ago, she had been bouncing off the walls with excitement about starting preschool. Now it seemed like all that joy had vanished. "Did something happen at school today?" he asked gently, placing a hand on her small shoulder. Keisha hugged her elephant tighter. "Some kids made me feel sad," she whispered. Peter's heart clenched. He wanted nothing more than to wrap his arms around his daughter and shield her from all the hurt in the world. But he knew he couldn't always protect her. He had to help her learn to face challenges. "I'm sorry to hear that, sweetie," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Can you tell me what happened?" Keisha's lower lip trembled. "They said my hair looks funny," she said, her voice barely audible. Peter felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a deep sadness. His little girl, with her beautiful curly hair, was being picked on for something she should be proud of. He took a deep breath, trying to find the right words to comfort her. "Your hair is beautiful, Keisha," he said firmly. "It's part of what makes you special." Keisha looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Really?" "Really," Peter nodded, gently stroking her curls. "Some people don't understand how wonderful it is to be different. But being different is what makes you unique and amazing." A small smile tugged at Keisha's lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Peter could see there was more bothering her, but he didn't want to push too hard. At 4 years old, Keisha was still learning how to express her feelings. "Is there anything else you want to tell me about school?" he asked softly. Keisha hesitated, then shook her head. "No, Daddy," she said. But Peter could hear the uncertainty in her voice. He pulled her into a warm hug, feeling her tiny body relax against him. "I'm always here for you, sweetheart," he whispered. "No matter what." As he held his daughter close, Peter's mind raced with worry. What else was happening at school that Keisha couldn't tell him? How could he help her when she struggled to explain what was wrong? He made a silent promise to himself and to Keisha that he would do whatever it took to make sure she felt safe and happy at school. Peter sat on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. The soft glow of the nightlight from Keisha's room spilled into the hallway, a constant reminder of his daughter's presence and the weight of his responsibility. He couldn't shake the image of Keisha's sad eyes from his mind. "What am I missing?" he whispered to himself, his voice heavy with concern. The next few days passed in a blur of worry and uncertainty. Peter watched Keisha closely, his heart aching with each sign of her distress. At breakfast, she barely touched her favorite cereal, pushing it around the bowl with her spoon. When he tried to catch her eye, she looked away. Her little shoulders slumped. "How was school today, sweetheart?" Peter asked gently as they walked home one afternoon. Keisha shrugged, her hand limp in his. "Okay," she mumbled, her eyes fixed on the sidewalk. Peter's stomach twisted with worry. He wanted to scoop her up in his arms and never let go, to shield her from whatever was causing her pain. But he knew he couldn't. Keisha needed to learn to face challenges, to grow strong and resilient. Yet how could he step back when his little girl was hurting? That night, as Peter tucked Keisha into bed, he noticed her favorite stuffed elephant was missing. "Where's Ellie?" he asked, looking around the room. Keisha's lower lip trembled. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Peter's heart sank. Ellie had been Keisha's constant companion since she was a baby. The elephant's absence spoke volumes about what might be happening at school. As he kissed Keisha goodnight and turned off the light, Peter made a decision. He couldn't stand by and watch his daughter suffer any longer. Something had to change, even if it meant taking an unusual approach. Sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by the quiet of the night, Peter pulled out a notepad and began to write. His pen flew across the paper as he jotted down ideas, plans, and possibilities. He knew his actions might raise eyebrows, but Keisha's happiness and well-being were worth any risk. "I'll do whatever it takes," Peter whispered, determination etched on his face. "You're not alone in this, Keisha. Daddy's got your back." The next evening, after tucking Keisha into bed, Peter sat at the kitchen table, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the image of his daughter's sad face as she picked at her dinner, barely saying a word. The weight of her silence pressed heavily on his heart. "I can't let this go on," Peter whispered to himself, running a hand through his hair. He pulled out his laptop and began searching online. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard as doubt crept in. Was he overreacting? Maybe this was just a phase, a normal part of growing up. But as he remembered Keisha's downcast eyes and slumped shoulders, his resolve strengthened. Peter found what he was looking for: a small, discreet recording device. It was tiny, no bigger than a button. His finger hovered over the Buy Now button as he wrestled with his conscience. "Is this right?" he asked the empty room. "Am I crossing a line?" But then he thought of Keisha's missing stuffed elephant, Ellie, and how his daughter's eyes had welled up with tears when he asked about it. Something was very wrong, and he needed to know what. With a deep breath, Peter clicked the button. The device would arrive in a few days. As he waited for the purchase to go through, Peter's mind raced with possibilities. What if he discovered something terrible? What if it was just harmless child's play that he was blowing out of proportion? The uncertainty gnawed at him. The next morning, Peter woke up early, his stomach in knots. He made Keisha's favorite breakfast, heart-shaped pancakes with strawberries, hoping to see her smile. But even the sight of her favorite food couldn't lift her spirits. As he braided Keisha's hair, he felt a deep weariness for her little girl. Each twist of the strands carried a silent weight, a reflection of his concern for her day at school. The tenderness in his fingers contrasted with the heaviness in his heart, knowing that life for her would not always be as gentle as the moment they shared. "There you go, sweetheart," he said, his voice catching in his throat. "All ready for school." Keisha nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the floor. Peter's heart ached as he watched her trudge to the car, her little backpack seeming to weigh her down. As he drove to the preschool, Peter's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. "Have a good day, Keisha," Peter said as he dropped her off, trying to keep his voice steady. "I love you." Keisha gave him a small wave before disappearing into the building. Peter sat in the car for a long moment, watching the door close behind her. He felt torn between racing in to scoop her up and trusting that he was doing the right thing. As he drove away, Peter whispered a quiet prayer. "Please, let this help. Let me find a way to make things better for her." The day stretched ahead, filled with worry and anticipation. Peter knew that by evening he would have answers. But would they be the answers he was prepared to hear? After a due days, the device already arrived. Peter's hands trembled as he carefully braided Keisha's hair, tucking the tiny recording device into one of the plaits. His heart raced, torn between guilt and determination. As he finished, he placed a gentle kiss on the top of her head. "There you go, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Keisha looked up at him with sad eyes, nodding silently. Peter's chest tightened at the sight of his usually bubbly daughter so subdued. He took her small hand in his as they walked to the car. The drive to preschool was quiet, with Keisha staring out the window. Peter glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his worry growing with each passing moment. As they pulled up to the school, he took a deep breath. "Enjoy your day at school, Keisha. I love you," Peter said, forcing a smile. Keisha gave him a small wave before trudging towards the building. Peter watched her go, his heart heavy. The sight of her little shoulders slumped under her backpack made him question his decision once again. "It's for her own good," he whispered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tightly. As he drove home, Peter's mind raced with possibilities. What would he hear? Was he overreacting? The guilt of invading Keisha's privacy warred with his desperate need to protect her. Back at home, Peter settled into his home office, his hands shaking as he connected the receiver to his computer. He put on his headphones, his heart pounding in his ears. As the audio feed crackled to life, he closed his eyes, listening intently. 15 minutes after dropping Keisha off, Peter sat at his desk, his eyes closed as he listened intently to the audio feed. At first, all he could hear were the typical sounds of a preschool classroom, children chattering, toys clattering, and the teacher's gentle voice giving instructions. Peter leaned in closer, straining to pick out Keisha's voice among the cacophony. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open as he heard a commotion through his headphones. Aggressive voices filled his ears, making his heart race. "Give it back," a child's voice demanded. "No way! It's ours now," another taunted. Peter's breath caught in his throat as he heard Keisha's voice, small and confused. But that's my teddy. Daddy gave it to me." The sound of scuffling feet and muffled cries made Peter's blood run cold. He could hear Keisha's distressed whimpers mixed with cruel laughter from the other children. "Stop it, please," Keisha cried out. There was a pause, then a harsh whisper. "No, you can't. We don't want you here." Peter's breath caught in his throat. He listened as another child chimed in. "Yeah, go away. Nobody likes you." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes as he heard Keisha's quiet sniffles. His fists clenched at his sides, a mix of anger and heartbreak washing over him. He wanted nothing more than to rush to the school and scoop Keisha into his arms. As the morning wore on, Peter listened to more instances of exclusion and unkind words directed at his daughter. Each cruel comment felt like a knife to his heart. He heard Keisha's attempts to join in games only to be rebuffed time and time again. Peter's hands shook as he listened, his mind racing with terrifying scenarios. He heard a loud thud followed by Keisha's pained yelp. The chaos of the moment overwhelmed him, and he felt his chest tighten with fear. Without hesitation, Peter reached for his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed 911, convinced that his daughter was in immediate danger. As the phone rang, he paced the room, his heart pounding in his ears. 911, what's your emergency?" a calm voice answered. "My daughter," Peter blurted out, his voice cracking with emotion. "She's being attacked at her preschool. I can hear it happening right now. Please, you have to help her." "Sir, can you tell me your location and the name of the preschool?" the operator asked. Peter rattled off the address and name of Keisha's school, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Please hurry," he begged. "She's only 4 years old. I'm afraid she's going to get seriously hurt." "We're dispatching officers to the location now, sir," the operator assured him. "Can you tell me how you know what's happening?" Peter hesitated for a moment, guilt washing over him. I put a recording device in her hair. I've been worried about her and now I can hear everything. There are kids hurting her and I don't hear any adults stopping it." Peter's heart raced as he paced back and forth in his living room, the phone clutched tightly to his ear. The 911 operator's calm voice seemed a stark contrast to the panic coursing through his veins. "Sir, please stay on the line. Officers are on their way to the school," the operator reassured him. But Peter couldn't wait. Every second felt like an eternity as he imagined his little girl in danger. Without a second thought, he grabbed his keys and bolted out the door, his phone still pressed to his ear. "I'm sorry, I can't just sit here," Peter told the operator, his voice shaking. "I'm going to the school. I need to be there for my daughter." As he sped down the streets, Peter's mind conjured up terrifying images. He saw Keisha, small and vulnerable, surrounded by cruel children. He imagined her tears, her fear, and it tore at his heart. "Please let her be okay," he whispered, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Traffic seemed to crawl at a snail's pace. Peter's foot tapped impatiently at every red light, his eyes darting between the road and his phone, where he could still hear the chaotic sounds from Keisha's preschool. As he neared the school, Peter saw flashing lights in the distance, The police had arrived before him. A mix of relief and renewed fear washed over him. What would he find when he got there? Peter burst through the school doors, his heart pounding in his chest. The hallway was a flurry of activity, with police officers talking to teachers and concerned parents starting to arrive. His eyes darted frantically around, searching for any sign of Keisha. "Where's my daughter?" he called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Is Keisha safe?" A police officer approached him, her expression calm but serious. "Sir, are you Keisha's father?" Peter nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes, I am. Where is she? Is she okay?" The officer placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Ricks, your daughter is safe. She's with one of our officers right now. The situation isn't quite what you might have imagined." Peter's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? I thought—" "There was indeed a confrontation at the school," the officer explained gently. "But it wasn't what you feared. Let's go somewhere quieter, and we can explain everything." As they walked towards a small office, Peter caught sight of Keisha sitting with another officer. She looked upset, but unharmed. Relief washed over him like a tidal wave. "Keisha!" he called out, his voice thick with emotion. The little girl looked up, her eyes wide and teary. "Daddy!" Peter rushed to her, scooping her up in his arms and holding her tight. He could feel her tiny body trembling against his chest. "I'm here, sweetie, I'm here," he murmured, stroking her hair. "You're safe now." The officer who had been with Keisha approached them. "Mr. Ricks, we've been talking to Keisha and some of the other children. It seems there was an incident of bullying that escalated today." Peter's heart sank. He looked down at Keisha, who was now sniffling quietly in his arms. "Is that true, honey? Were kids being mean to you?" Keisha nodded, her lower lip quivering. "They called me names and pushed me. But I tried to be brave, Daddy. I tried to stand up for myself like you taught me." Tears welled up in Peter's eyes. He felt a mix of pride for his daughter's courage and guilt for not realizing sooner what she had been going through. The first officer spoke up again. "Mr. Ricks, we understand you were the one who called 911. Can you tell us more about why you felt Keisha was in immediate danger?" Peter swallowed hard, suddenly feeling embarrassed about his extreme reaction. He explained about the recording device and what he had heard, his face flushing with shame. The officers exchanged glances. "We appreciate your concern for your daughter," one said gently. "But in the future, it's important to communicate directly with the school if you have concerns." What you heard was likely a heated argument between children, which the teachers were in the process of addressing. Peter nodded, feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. He hugged Keisha closer, realizing how much his fear had clouded his judgment. As Peter held Keisha close, the school principal approached them with a gentle smile. "Mr. Ricks, there's something you should know about what happened today," she said softly. Peter looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. "What is it?" The principal knelt down to Keisha's level. "Keisha, would you like to tell your dad what you did today?" Keisha pulled away from Peter's chest, her eyes still damp but now shining with a hint of pride. "I helped my friend, Daddy," she said in a small voice. Peter's confusion grew. "What do you mean, sweetie?" The principal smiled warmly at Keisha before turning to Peter. "Mr. Ricks, your daughter did something very brave today. One of her classmates was being bullied by some older kids, and Keisha stood up for her friend." Peter's eyes widened in surprise. He looked down at his little girl, who suddenly seemed so much bigger than her 4 years. "Is that true, Keisha?" Keisha nodded, her chin quivering slightly. "They were being mean to Mia. I told them to stop, just like you taught me to be kind to everyone." A lump formed in Peter's throat as he listened to his daughter's words. Pride swelled in his chest, threatening to burst out in tears of joy. "The voices you heard," the principal continued, "were from this confrontation. Keisha was defending her friend, not being bullied herself." Peter's mind reeled as he processed this information. He had jumped to conclusions, assuming Keisha was the victim when in reality, she had been the brave defender. He felt a mix of emotions wash over him: relief, pride, and a twinge of guilt for not trusting in Keisha's ability to handle the situation. "Oh, Keisha," Peter breathed, hugging her tightly once more. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You were so brave to stand up for your friend." Keisha smiled up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I remembered what you always say, Daddy. Be kind and help others." Peter's heart swelled with love and admiration for his little girl. He had been so focused on protecting her that he hadn't realized how capable and strong she had become. Keisha had faced a difficult situation with courage and kindness, embodying the very values he had tried to instill in her. As he held his daughter close, Peter felt a mix of emotions. He was overjoyed at Keisha's bravery and kindness, but he also felt a pang of guilt for not trusting her more. He realized that, in his desire to protect her, he had underestimated her ability to navigate challenges on her own. As Peter listened to Keisha's brave tale, his heart swelled with pride. His little girl had shown such courage and kindness, but as he gazed into her eyes, he noticed a flicker of something else, a hint of sadness that hadn't been there before. "Keisha, sweetie," Peter said gently, "is there something else you want to tell me?" Keisha's lower lip trembled slightly, and she looked down at her shoes. I didn't want to make you sad, Daddy," she whispered. Peter's brow furrowed with concern. He knelt down to her level, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You can tell me anything, honey. What's wrong?" Keisha took a deep breath, her little shoulders rising and falling. "The mean kids. They've been saying mean things to me too," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Peter felt his heart sink. "Oh, Keisha," he breathed, pulling her into a tight hug. "Why didn't you tell me?" Keisha buried her face in his shoulder. "I didn't want you to worry, Daddy. You always look so sad when I'm upset." Peter's eyes filled with tears. He had been so focused on protecting Keisha that he hadn't realized she was trying to protect him too. The thought of his little girl bearing this burden alone broke his heart. "Sweetheart," Peter said, his voice thick with emotion, "it's my job to worry about you. You don't have to hide things to make me feel better. I'm here to help you no matter what." As they held each other close, a small voice piped up nearby. "Keisha?" Peter and Keisha looked up to see a little girl with pigtails standing shyly next to them. It was Mia, Keisha's friend. Mia's eyes were wide with gratitude as she looked at Keisha. "Thank you for helping me today," she said softly. "You were really brave." Keisha's face lit up with a small smile. "You're my friend, Mia. I didn't want them to be mean to you." Peter watched in awe as the two girls shared a moment of understanding. He realized that Keisha's bravery had not only protected her friend, but had also forged a stronger bond between them. As he looked at his daughter, Peter saw her in a new light. She was no longer just his little girl who needed protection. She was a brave, compassionate young person who was learning to stand up for herself and others. His heart filled with love and admiration for the amazing child she was becoming. Peter felt his heart shatter as he listened to Keisha's quiet confession. The realization that his little girl had been suffering in silence for weeks hit him like a tidal wave of guilt and sorrow. He pulled her close, his eyes brimming with tears. Peter shook his head, gently cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Keisha. You could never be a burden to me. Never. It's my job to keep you safe and happy, and I promise I'll do a better job of that from now on." He took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "You should always tell me when something's bothering you, okay? No matter what it is. We're a team, you and me." Keisha nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Okay, Daddy." As Peter held his daughter close, a fierce determination welled up inside him. He couldn't change the past, but he could certainly shape the future. He would make sure Keisha never felt alone or afraid again. "I'm going to talk to your teachers and the principal," Peter said, his voice firm but gentle. "We're going to make sure this bullying stops, not just for you, but for all the kids at your school." Keisha's eyes widened. "Really?" Peter nodded, a reassuring smile on his face. "Really. No one should have to feel scared at school. It's supposed to be a safe place where you can learn and make friends." As he spoke, Peter's mind was already racing with plans. He would schedule a meeting with the school administration first thing in the morning. He'd insist on new anti-bullying measures, better supervision during playtime, and maybe even workshops to teach kids about kindness and empathy. "We're going to fix this together, Keisha," Peter said, giving her another tight hug. "I promise you'll never have to face something like this alone again." The next morning, Peter woke up early, his mind already racing with thoughts of the day ahead. He gently woke Keisha, helping her get ready for school with extra care and attention. As he fixed her hair, he made sure to give her an extra tight hug. "Remember, sweetie," he said softly, "you're brave and strong. If anything happens today, you tell your teacher right away, okay?" Keisha nodded, her big brown eyes looking up at him trustingly. "I will, Daddy." After dropping Keisha off at school, Peter headed straight for the administration office. His heart was pounding, but his resolve was firm. He had to make things right for his little girl and all the other children who might be suffering in silence. The school secretary looked up as Peter entered. "Mr. Ricks, how can I help you?" "I need to speak with the principal and Keisha's teacher," Peter said, his voice steady. "It's urgent." Within minutes, Peter found himself seated across from Principal Ramirez and Ms. Brayson, Keisha's teacher. Both women looked concerned as Peter began to explain the situation. "After the incident yesterday, we've further looked on to what's happening to the class, and we've recently discovered that there's been ongoing bullying in Keisha's class," Peter started, his voice tight with emotion. "My daughter and other children have been targeted, and it's been happening right under your noses." Principal Ramirez's eyes widened in shock. "Mr. Ricks, I assure you, we had no idea until what happened recently. We take bullying very seriously here." Peter leaned forward, his eyes intense. "That's the problem. You didn't know. These kids, including my 4-year-old daughter, have been suffering and nobody noticed." Ms. Brayson looked stricken. I had no idea. Keisha always seemed so happy in class." "She was hiding it," Peter said, his voice softening slightly. "She didn't want to worry me. But that stops now. We need to make changes to ensure this never happens again." Peter laid out his demands clearly and firmly. He insisted on increased supervision during playtime, regular check-ins with each child to assess their emotional well-being, and the implementation of an anti-bullying program suitable for preschoolers. "We need to create an environment where kids feel safe to speak up," Peter emphasized, "where kindness and empathy are taught alongside ABCs and 123s. Principal Ramirez nodded, looking both chastened and determined. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Ricks. We've clearly fallen short, and we need to do better. I promise you, we'll implement these changes immediately." Ms. Brayson chimed in, her voice filled with remorse and resolve. "I'll start today. I'll have one-on-one chats with each child. Make sure they know they can come to me with any problems." Peter felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't a complete solution yet, but it was a start. He knew there would be more work to do, more conversations to have. But for now, he had taken the first step in making Keisha's world a little safer. Peter left the meeting with mixed emotions. While he was glad the school had agreed to take action, a nagging doubt lingered in his mind. He walked slowly to his car, his brow furrowed in thought. As he drove home, Peter replayed the conversation in his head. Principal Ramirez and Ms. Brayson had seemed genuinely shocked and remorseful about the bullying situation. They had promised to investigate thoroughly and implement new procedures to prevent future incidents. "We'll be conducting daily check-ins with each child," Ms. Brayson had assured him. "And we're bringing in a child psychologist to help us create an age-appropriate anti-bullying program." Principal Ramirez had added, "We're also increasing supervision during playtime and training our staff to recognize signs of bullying." These were all positive steps, and Peter knew he should feel relieved. But as he pulled into his driveway, he couldn't shake off his skepticism. Would these changes really be enough to protect Keisha and the other children? Peter sighed heavily as he entered the empty house. He glanced at the clock, noting that he still had a few hours before picking up Keisha from school. Settling onto the couch, he pulled out his phone and began researching anti-bullying strategies for young children. As he scrolled through articles and resources, Peter's determination grew. He realized that while the school's efforts were important, he needed to take an active role in ensuring Keisha's safety and happiness. "I can't just rely on the school," he murmured to himself. "I need to be involved every step of the way." Peter started making a list of things he could do. He would have daily conversations with Keisha about her experiences at school, teaching her how to express her feelings and stand up for herself. He'd arrange playdates with her classmates, hoping to foster friendships and create a support network for her. He also decided to volunteer at the school whenever possible, to observe the dynamics in Keisha's class firsthand. And he'd make sure to maintain open communication with Ms. Brayson and Principal Ramirez, following up regularly on the promised changes. As Peter jotted down his ideas, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was committed to doing whatever it took to ensure Keisha's well-being. "I'll be there for you, sweetheart," he whispered, looking at a photo of Keisha on the mantel. "Every step of the way." As the days passed, Peter began to notice subtle changes in Keisha's behavior. Though she was only 4, the experience of being bullied had left its mark on her young spirit. He watched her closely, his heart aching as he saw the weight of her recent struggles reflected in her eyes. One evening, as they sat together on the living room floor, building a tower of colorful blocks, Peter noticed Keisha's hands trembling slightly. She knocked over the tower accidentally, and her bottom lip quivered. "It's okay, sweetheart," Peter said gently, reaching out to pat her hand. "We can build it again." Keisha looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I messed it up." Peter's chest tightened at the unnecessary guilt in her voice. He pulled her into a warm hug, stroking her hair softly. "You didn't mess anything up, Keisha. Accidents happen. You're doing great." As he held her, Peter realized how much she had been internalizing her stress. He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "Keisha, I want you to know something very important. You are so brave and strong. What happened at school wasn't your fault, and I'm so proud of how you stood up for your friend." Keisha sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Really?" she asked in a small voice. "Really," Peter affirmed, his voice filled with love and pride. "You're my little hero." A tiny smile tugged at Keisha's lips, but it faded quickly. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with a block. "I didn't want to make you sad, Daddy," she whispered. "That's why I didn't tell you about the mean kids before." Peter's heart broke at her words. He gently lifted her chin, meeting her gaze. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You could never make me sad by telling me what's bothering you. I always want to know if something's wrong, okay? You don't have to protect me, that's my job, to protect you." Keisha nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "I can always tell you everything?" she asked. "Always," Peter assured her, pulling her close again. "No matter what it is, I'm here for you." As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Peter felt a deeper bond forming between them. He realized that this experience, as difficult as it had been, had opened up a new level of communication and trust between him and Keisha. In the weeks that followed, Peter's involvement with Keisha's preschool grew deeper. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more to ensure his daughter's safety and happiness. With a determined spirit, he approached the school administration and offered to volunteer his time. "I'd like to help out with events and activities," Peter explained to Mrs. Brayson, the preschool director. "I think it's important for parents to be more involved." Mrs. Brayson's face lit up. "That's wonderful, Mr. Ricks. We could always use more helping hands." Peter started small, assisting with simple tasks like setting up for art projects and tidying up after snack time. As he spent more time at the school, he began to notice things he hadn't seen before. The way some children played together while others stood alone. The quiet whispers that sometimes led to hurt feelings. During these moments, Peter made it a point to engage with all the children, especially those who seemed left out. He'd invite them to join in activities or simply offer a kind word. Keisha beamed with pride whenever she saw her dad at school, her eyes shining with newfound confidence. As Peter became a familiar face around the preschool, other parents started to take notice. One afternoon, after helping with a finger painting activity, a mom approached him. "It's so great to see a dad so involved," she said warmly. "I'm Maria, Ethan's mom." Peter smiled, wiping paint off his hands. "I'm Peter, Keisha's dad. Nice to meet you." Their conversation flowed easily, and Peter found himself opening up about Keisha's experience with bullying. Maria listened intently, her eyes widening. "I had no idea," she said softly. "That must have been so hard for both of you." Peter nodded, his voice filled with emotion. "It was, but it made me realize how important it is to talk about these things." Word spread quickly among the parents about Peter's story. Soon, he found himself having more conversations about bullying and discrimination. Some parents shared their own experiences, while others asked how they could help create a safer environment for all the children. Inspired by the positive response, Peter approached Ms. Brayson with an idea. "I think we should have a parent meeting to discuss bullying prevention," he suggested. "Maybe we could bring in an expert to talk about how to spot the signs and what we can do to help." Ms. Brayson agreed enthusiastically, and within a week a meeting was scheduled. As Peter stood before the group of parents and teachers, he felt a mix of nervousness and determination. "I never thought I'd be standing here talking about this," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "But my daughter's experience opened my eyes to how important it is that we all work together to create a safe space for our kids." As the days passed, Keisha began to blossom like a flower in spring. With Peter's unwavering support, she found the courage to open up more at school. Her shy smiles grew wider, and her quiet voice became a little louder each day. One morning, as Peter walked Keisha to her classroom, he knelt down and looked into her big brown eyes. "Remember, sweetheart," he said gently, "you're brave and kind. It's okay to speak up if something doesn't feel right." Keisha nodded, squeezing her father's hand. "I know, Daddy, you tell me every day." Peter chuckled softly. "That's right, and I'll keep telling you until you believe it with all your heart." As Keisha entered her classroom, she took a deep breath. She spotted her friend Emily sitting alone at a table, looking sad. Without hesitation, Keisha walked over and sat down next to her. "Are you okay, Emily?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Emily shook her head, her lower lip trembling. "Tommy said my drawing was ugly," she whispered. Keisha felt a surge of protectiveness. She remembered how her dad had taught her to stand up for herself and others. "That's not nice," she said firmly. Then, with a smile, she added, "I think your drawings are beautiful. Want to color together?" Emily's face lit up, and soon the two girls were giggling and drawing colorful pictures side by side. As the weeks went by, Keisha's natural kindness and bravery began to shine brighter. She found herself speaking up more often, not just for herself but for others too. When she saw someone sitting alone at lunch, she'd invite them to join her. If she heard unkind words, she'd gently remind her classmates to be nice. Her teacher, Ms. Brayson, noticed the change in Keisha. One afternoon, she pulled Peter aside during pickup time. "Mr. Ricks," she said warmly, "I just wanted to let you know how proud I am of Keisha. She's really come out of her shell lately." Peter's heart swelled with pride. "That's wonderful to hear," he replied, his eyes misting slightly. Ms. Brayson continued, "She's become quite the little peacemaker in our class. Just yesterday, she helped two boys resolve an argument over a toy. It was remarkable to watch." As Peter drove Keisha home that day, he couldn't help but glance at her in the rearview mirror. She was humming softly to herself, a content smile on her face. "How was school today, Sweet Pea?" he asked. Keisha's eyes sparkled. "It was great, Daddy. I made a new friend named Michael. He was scared to go on the big slide, so I held his hand and we went down together." Peter felt a lump form in his throat. His little girl was growing up, facing her fears and helping others face theirs too. "That was very brave and kind of you, Keisha," he said softly. As they pulled into their driveway, Keisha unbuckled her seatbelt and looked at her father with a serious expression. "Daddy," she said, "I think I want to have a play date with Michael. Can we invite him over?" Peter nodded, his heart full of love and pride. "Of course we can, sweetheart. I think that's a wonderful idea." As Peter became more involved in Keisha's school life, he began to notice things he hadn't before. One afternoon, while helping out at a school event, he overheard a conversation between two mothers that made his heart sink. "I just don't know what to do anymore," one woman said, her voice trembling. "Jamal comes home every day saying the other kids won't play with him because of his skin color." Peter's ears perked up, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He listened more closely as the other mother responded. "I know exactly what you mean," she sighed. "My daughter Aisha has been having similar problems. It's like some of the kids have already learned to exclude others who look different." Peter's mind raced. He had thought Keisha's situation was isolated, but now he realized the problem ran much deeper. With a heavy heart, he approached the two women. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't help overhearing," he said gently. "My daughter Keisha has been through something similar. I had no idea this was happening to other children too." The three parents began to share their experiences, and Peter's concern grew with each story. It became clear that minority children throughout the preschool were facing discrimination and exclusion. Determined to make a change, Peter reached out to other parents of minority children. He organized a meeting at his home, inviting anyone who wanted to discuss the issue. To his surprise, nearly a dozen parents showed up, each with their own story of their child facing prejudice at the preschool. As they sat in Peter's living room, the air heavy with shared worry and frustration, Peter stood up. "We can't let this continue," he said firmly. "Our children deserve better. We need to push for real change in the preschool's policies and attitudes." The other parents nodded in agreement, their faces a mix of determination and hope. Together, they began to formulate a plan. They would request a meeting with the school board, present their concerns, and demand concrete actions to address the discrimination. Peter took the lead in drafting a letter to the school board, outlining the experiences of their children and proposing solutions. The group suggested diversity training for staff, implementation of an anti-bullying program that specifically addressed racial and cultural differences, and the introduction of multicultural education into the curriculum. As he sealed the envelope containing their petition, Peter felt a mix of emotions. He was angry that so many children had suffered in silence, but he was also hopeful. By coming together, they had a chance to create real change, not just for Keisha, but for all the children at the preschool. As the days passed, Keisha's demeanor began to change. The shy, withdrawn little girl who had once hesitated to go to school now bounded out of bed each morning, eager to start her day. Peter watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and amazement. One morning, as he helped Keisha tie her shoes, she looked up at him with bright eyes. "Daddy, guess what? I made a new friend." Peter's heart swelled. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Who is it?" "It's Daisy, the girl I helped when those mean kids were picking on her," Keisha explained. "We play together every day now." Peter smiled, remembering the day he had heard the commotion through the recording device. What had seemed like a moment of danger had actually been his daughter's first step towards becoming a protector of others. At school, Keisha and Maya became inseparable. Their friendship blossomed, built on a foundation of kindness and mutual support. Keisha's natural empathy shone through as she helped Maya feel more comfortable at school. One day during playtime, Keisha had an idea. She gathered a small group of children, including Maya and a few others who had experienced bullying. "Let's make a kindness group," she suggested, her voice filled with enthusiasm. The other children looked at her curiously. "What's that?" one boy asked. Keisha's eyes lit up as she explained. "It's where we all come together and talk about being nice to each other. We can share stories and figure out how to help our friends when they're sad." The idea caught on quickly. Soon, a small circle of children could be seen gathered in a corner of the playground during recess, sharing stories and offering words of encouragement to one another. When Peter heard about the kindness group from Keisha's teacher, he could hardly believe his ears. His little girl, who had once been too afraid to speak up about her own troubles, was now leading others in spreading kindness. That evening, as Peter tucked Keisha into bed, he couldn't help but express his pride. "I heard about your kindness group, sweetheart. That was such a wonderful idea." Keisha beamed up at him. "I just wanted to help, Daddy, like you always do." Peter felt a lump form in his throat. He pulled Keisha into a tight hug, marveling at the compassionate heart that beat within his daughter's small chest. In that moment, he realized that Keisha had not only overcome her own challenges, but had also become an inspiration to others. As he kissed her goodnight, Peter reflected on how much Keisha had grown from this difficult situation. What had started as a painful experience had transformed into an opportunity for his daughter to discover her own strength and capacity for empathy. Peter felt a renewed sense of hope, not just for Keisha, but for all the children at the preschool. His daughter's simple act of kindness was creating ripples of change, and he couldn't have been more proud. Peter's determination to create a safer, more inclusive environment at Keisha's preschool didn't waver. He continued to work closely with the school administration, pushing for meaningful changes that would benefit all children. One sunny afternoon, Peter sat in a meeting with the school principal, Ms. Ramirez, and several board members. The atmosphere was charged with purpose as they discussed new anti-bullying measures. "We need to do more than just punish bullies," Peter said, his voice filled with passion. "We need to create an environment where every child feels valued and supported." Ms. Ramirez nodded in agreement. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Ricks. We've been looking into hiring counselors specifically trained to work with young children." Peter's eyes lit up. "That's a great start. And what about training for the teachers?" Over the next few weeks, Peter worked tirelessly alongside the school staff to implement these changes. The school hired 2 part-time counselors who specialized in early childhood development and conflict resolution. They began offering regular sessions for children who needed extra support, as well as group activities designed to foster empathy and understanding among all students. The teachers underwent comprehensive training on recognizing signs of bullying and creating an inclusive classroom environment. Peter even volunteered to share his and Keisha's story during one of the training sessions, bringing tears to the eyes of many staff members. As the new measures took effect, Peter began to notice positive changes throughout the school. Children who had once been isolated were now finding friends. The playground, once a source of anxiety for some, became a place of joyful play for all. One day, while picking up Keisha from school, Peter overheard a conversation between 2 parents. "Have you noticed how much happier Tommy seems lately?" one mother said to another. "Oh, absolutely," the other replied. "He used to dread coming to school, but now he can't wait to get here in the mornings. Whatever changes they've made, they're really working." Peter couldn't help but smile, feeling a warm sense of pride wash over him. He knew that his efforts, along with those of the school staff, were making a real difference in the lives of these children. As he watched Keisha emerge from her classroom, chatting animatedly with a diverse group of friends, Peter felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had not only helped his own daughter, but had played a part in creating a more compassionate and understanding environment for all the children at the preschool. As the weeks passed, Keisha's kindness group blossomed into a regular fixture at the preschool. What had started as a small gathering of friends now drew more and more children each week. The group met in a cozy corner of the classroom, filled with colorful cushions and stuffed animals. Peter stood quietly by the classroom door, his heart swelling with pride as he watched Keisha lead her group. His little girl, once shy and withdrawn, now radiated confidence as she spoke to her classmates. "Remember, friends," Keisha said, her voice clear and kind, "we're all special in our own way. If someone's feeling sad, we can give them a hug or share our toys." The other children nodded, hanging on her every word. Peter noticed how Keisha made eye contact with each child, making sure everyone felt included. A little boy with glasses raised his hand timidly. "But what if the big kids are mean to us?" Keisha smiled gently. "Then we stick together. We can tell a grown-up, or we can all be nice to that person. Sometimes, people are mean because they're sad inside." Peter marveled at his daughter's wisdom. She was only 4, yet she spoke with the compassion of someone much older. As the group continued, Peter saw Keisha offer a tissue to a sniffling girl and pat the back of a boy who looked upset. She moved around the circle, making sure everyone had a chance to speak and be heard. "You're all so brave," Keisha said, beaming at her friends. "Let's practice our kindness cheer." The children stood up, giggling as they repeated after Keisha, "Be kind, be strong, together we belong." Peter felt a lump form in his throat. His daughter, who had faced her own struggles with bullying, was now a beacon of hope for her classmates. She had turned her pain into purpose, becoming a role model for kindness and courage. As the group dispersed, Peter saw children approach Keisha, giving her high fives and hugs. She had touched their lives in a way he never could have imagined. Ms. Ramirez, the principal, appeared beside Peter. "Your daughter is quite remarkable, Mr. Ricks," she said softly. "She's changed the entire atmosphere of our school." Peter nodded, too choked up to speak. He realized that Keisha wasn't just brave, she was a natural leader, inspiring others with her compassion and strength. The annual spring celebration at Keisha's preschool was in full swing. Colorful balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, and excited chatter filled the air as parents, teachers, and children gathered in the school's small auditorium. Peter sat in the front row, his heart racing with a mix of pride and nervousness. Ms. Ramirez stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone gently. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have a special treat for you today. 2 of our brave students will be sharing an important message about kindness and courage." Peter watched as Keisha and her friend Tommy walked hand in hand to the stage. Keisha's pigtails bounced with each step, and her yellow dress seemed to glow under the stage lights. She looked so small standing behind the microphone, but her eyes sparkled with determination. "Hi, everyone," Keisha began, her voice slightly shaky. She took a deep breath and continued, "Me and Tommy want to talk about being nice to each other." Tommy nodded enthusiastically beside her. "Yeah, 'cause sometimes people can be mean, and that's not okay." Keisha's confidence grew as she spoke. "In our kindness group, we learned that everyone is special. It doesn't matter if you wear glasses or have curly hair or talk different. We're all friends here." Peter felt tears welling up in his eyes as he listened to his daughter's words. She was only 4, yet she spoke with such wisdom and compassion. "If you see someone being mean," Keisha continued, her voice growing stronger, "you should tell a grown-up, or you can be extra nice to the person who's feeling sad." Tommy chimed in, "Yeah, and if you're scared, remember you're not alone. We can all be brave together." Keisha smiled at her friend before turning back to the audience. "My daddy always says that being kind is like giving away pieces of your heart. It might feel scary, but it makes the whole world better." A hush fell over the auditorium as Keisha's words sank in. Peter saw parents wiping away tears and children nodding in agreement. "So let's all promise to be kind," Keisha said, her voice clear and strong. "Let's stand up for each other and make our school a happy place for everyone." The audience burst into applause as Keisha and Tommy took a bow. Peter stood up, clapping so hard his hands hurt. His heart swelled with pride as he watched Keisha's face light up with a huge smile. As Keisha stepped off the stage, her eyes found Peter's in the crowd. She gave him a little wave, and in that moment, Peter saw not just his little girl, but a brave, compassionate leader who was changing her world one act of kindness at a time. As the weeks passed following Keisha's inspiring speech, the atmosphere at Little Sunshine Preschool began to shift noticeably. The hallways, once filled with occasional tension and whispered conflicts, now buzzed with laughter and friendly chatter. Children who had once kept to themselves now played together in mixed groups, their differences celebrated rather than shunned. Peter noticed the change every time he dropped Keisha off at school. Where once he'd felt a knot of worry in his stomach, he now felt a warm sense of pride and relief. He watched as Keisha confidently joined her classmates, her smile bright and genuine. One morning, as Peter was helping Keisha take off her coat, Ms. Ramirez approached them with a beaming smile. "Mr. Ricks," she said, "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. The change in our school is remarkable." Peter felt a flush of modest embarrassment. "I'm just glad I could help," he replied. "How are things going?" Ms. Ramirez's eyes lit up. "Oh, it's wonderful. The children are so much more inclusive now. Just yesterday, I saw a group of kids inviting the new student, who doesn't speak much English yet, to join their game. They were using hand gestures and simple words to make sure he understood. It was heartwarming to see. Peter's chest swelled with emotion. He looked down at Keisha, who was listening intently to the conversation. "That's great to hear," he said, giving Keisha's hand a gentle squeeze. As the days went by, Peter noticed more positive changes. The preschool had implemented a buddy system, pairing up children from different backgrounds to foster understanding and friendship. Keisha came home one day, excitedly telling Peter about her new buddy May and how they were learning words in each other's languages. The staff, too, seemed more attuned to the children's emotional needs. Peter observed teachers kneeling down to eye level with upset children, offering comfort and guidance with patience and understanding. The new counselor, Ms. Thompson, had become a beloved figure in the school, her office always open for children who needed a safe space to talk. One afternoon, as Peter waited to pick up Keisha, he overheard two other parents talking. "This place has changed so much," one said. "My son used to hate coming to school, but now he can't wait to get here every morning." The other parent nodded in agreement. "I know what you mean. My daughter feels so much more confident now. She's even made friends with kids she used to be afraid of." Peter felt a warmth spread through his chest. He had started this journey out of concern for Keisha, but it had grown into something much bigger. The ripple effect of his actions had touched not just his daughter, but an entire community. As Keisha ran out to meet him, her face glowing with happiness, Peter realized that his efforts had truly made a lasting impact. The preschool was no longer just a place of learning, but a nurturing environment where every child felt valued and supported. As Peter watched Keisha play with her friends in the schoolyard, a wave of emotion washed over him. He marveled at how much had changed in just a few short months. The worried, protective father he'd been seemed like a distant memory now. That evening, after dinner, Peter and Keisha sat together on their favorite spot on the porch swing. The gentle creaking of the chains filled the comfortable silence between them. Peter looked down at his daughter, her small hand nestled in his. "Keisha," he said softly, "I'm so proud of you, sweetie. You know that, right?" Keisha looked up at him, her big brown eyes shining. "I know, Daddy. I'm proud of you too." Peter chuckled, his heart swelling with love. "You've taught me so much, you know that? When all this started, I thought I had to protect you from everything, but you showed me how strong you really are." Keisha nodded, her face serious. "I was scared at first, Daddy, but then I remembered what you always say about being brave." Peter smiled, remembering the countless bedtime stories he'd told her about courage and kindness. "That's right, sweetheart. But you know what? You taught me something important too." "What's that?" Keisha asked, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "You taught me that sometimes the best way to protect someone is to let them find their own strength," Peter explained, his voice thick with emotion. "When you stood up for your friend, when you started the kindness group, you showed me that you have a voice of your own and it's a powerful one." Keisha beamed at her father's words. "We did it together, Daddy. You helped me be brave." Peter pulled her close, planting a kiss on the top of her head. "We sure did, sweetie. We've both grown so much through all of this, haven't we?" As they sat there, gently swinging back and forth, Peter reflected on their journey. He thought about the scared, overprotective father he'd been, and how Keisha's courage had transformed not just the school, but their entire family dynamic. "You know, Keisha," Peter said softly, "I used to think my job was to shield you from the world, but now I see that my real job is to give you the tools to face it bravely, just like you've been doing." Keisha snuggled closer to her father. "And you'll always be there to help me, right, Daddy?" Peter's heart melted at her words. "Always, sweetheart, we're a team, you and me, and together we can face anything." That weekend, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the backyard, Peter and Keisha's home buzzed with the joyful chatter of family and friends. The aroma of grilled burgers and sweet corn wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. It was a celebration, not just of their recent triumphs, but of the journey they had taken together. Peter stood by the grill, flipping burgers and smiling as he watched Keisha dart between groups of adults, her face beaming with confidence. She was in her element, regaling everyone with stories of her kindness group and the positive changes at school. Her eyes sparkled with a happiness that Peter hadn't seen in months, and it filled his heart with an indescribable joy. Aunt Martha approached Peter, giving him a warm hug. "You've done an amazing job with her, Peter," she said, nodding towards Keisha. "She's flourishing." Peter's eyes misted over as he replied, "She's the one who's amazing. I just gave her the space to shine." As the evening wore on, the gathering moved to the living room. Keisha nestled between Peter and her grandmother on the couch, surrounded by the love and warmth of their family. Uncle Tom raised his glass, "To Peter and Keisha, for showing us all what it means to be brave and kind." A chorus of "Hear, hear" echoed through the room, and Keisha giggled, burying her face in Peter's side. He wrapped his arm around her, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at ease, knowing that Keisha was not just safe but thriving. Later, as the last of their guests departed, Peter and Keisha sat on the porch swing, mirroring their favorite spot for heart-to-heart talks. The night air was cool and crisp, filled with the gentle chirping of crickets. "Did you have fun tonight, sweetie?" Peter asked, gently pushing the swing with his foot. Keisha nodded enthusiastically. "It was the best, Daddy. Everyone was so happy and proud of us." Peter smiled, his heart swelling with love. "They sure were, and you know what? I'm the proudest of all." Keisha looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What do you think will happen next, Daddy? At school and everything?" Peter took a deep breath, considering his words carefully. "Well, sweetheart, I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I do know one thing for sure." "What's that?" Keisha asked, snuggling closer. "No matter what happens, no matter what challenges come our way, we'll face them together," Peter said, giving her a gentle squeeze. "Just like we did this time. We're a team, you and me." Keisha's face lit up with a smile. "Promise?" "I promise," Peter replied, his voice filled with warmth and conviction. "Always and forever, kiddo. We've got each other's backs, no matter what." As the weeks passed, Peter remained deeply involved in the preschool community. He attended every parent-teacher meeting, volunteered for school events, and continued to advocate for kindness and inclusivity. His efforts didn't go unnoticed, and soon other parents began to join him in his mission. One sunny afternoon, Peter stood at the back of the classroom, his heart swelling with pride as he watched Keisha lead another meeting of her kindness group. The children sat in a circle on colorful cushions, their faces eager and attentive as Keisha spoke. "Remember, everyone," Keisha said, her voice clear and confident, "being kind is like giving someone a hug with your words. It makes them feel warm and happy inside." Peter marveled at how much his daughter had grown. She was no longer the shy, withdrawn little girl who had been struggling with bullies just a few months ago. Now she stood tall, her eyes bright with purpose as she guided her classmates through exercises in empathy and kindness. "Let's practice our kind words," Keisha continued. "Turn to the person next to you and say something nice about them." The room filled with giggles and whispers as the children complimented each other. Peter watched as smiles bloomed on their faces, and he felt a warmth spread through his chest. This was what he had hoped for, a safe, nurturing environment where every child felt valued and supported. As the meeting came to an end, Keisha noticed her father standing by the door. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs in a tight hug. "Did you see, Daddy? Did you see how kind everyone was being?" Peter knelt down, meeting Keisha's eyes. "I sure did, sweetheart. You're doing an amazing job leading the group. I'm so proud of you." Keisha beamed, her smile as bright as the sun. "I learned it from you, Daddy. You taught me how to be brave and stand up for what's right." Peter felt his eyes mist over as he pulled Keisha into a warm embrace. He knew then that his daughter was not just resilient, she was a force for good, capable of inspiring positive change in the world around her. As they walked hand in hand out of the classroom, Peter realized that their journey had come full circle. What had started as a desperate attempt to protect his daughter had blossomed into something far greater. Together, they had not only overcome their own challenges, but had also helped create a community where kindness and inclusivity flourished. Peter squeezed Keisha's hand gently, feeling grateful for the bond they shared and the lessons they had learned together. He knew that whatever the future held, they would face it with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to making the world a little bit better, one act of kindness at a time. If you enjoyed the story of Peter and Keisha, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.